That was Karen Elson singing her song Fly On, which appears on the Grammy Award-winning For the Birds, the Birdsong Project. On the mic with us today is LA-based Rebecca Reagan.
I've always had this idea in me since I was probably a young child. I remember thinking, oh, it would be cool to do something with birdsong and human music.
Becky is a longtime meditator and a certified meditation coach who is using her experience as a producer and artist to help bring healing to the world.
What I find is when I meditate, you get the inner voice that comes from the space of compassion and love. And what happens when you activate that inner voice and you follow that inner voice, it leads to other people's, when they're following theirs, and the dots start connecting.
Welcome to another episode of the Rise Up and Fix It podcast. I am your host, Ina Korobkina.
And I'm Ingrid J. Monday.
And this is our conversation with Rebecca Reagan.
Rebecca, it is such an honor to have you on the mic today. You are incredible. This For the Birds, the Birdsong Project, I've been listening to this for the last 2 days on repeat. The artists on this box set are just amazing. Like, we're talking like superstars like Elvis Costello, Yoko Ono, Beck, Animal Collective, Nick Cave, who is incredible, by the way, Daniel Lanois. Like, these are legends. I'm just blown away by what you've created, all combined with the combination of including Birdsong. Listeners, you have to pick this up and you have to buy this album. Like, it is incredible. But before we go into like the details of the actual For the Birds, the Birdsong Project, I want to know about you, Rebecca.
Sure. So my background is actually a producer. So I've been producing content for 20 years. I've done everything from huge Super Bowl commercials for brands like TikTok and AT&T. And then I've done tons of other content for nonprofits, for other household name brands. I got my start at MTV. I was a producer there. I segment produced and wrote some stuff at VH1 early on in my career. And then I met Ina at theater school, but I've always been a bird person my whole life. I've always been very attuned to the birds, their rhythm, and also to meditation. From a very young child, I was just naturally meditating. It was a natural instinct, like walking. And so when I first began my meditation practice, that was when I was about 20 years old, formal meditation practice with a teacher. And that was with our friend Galit, who is a mutual friend of mine and Ina's. So Galit and I, we were university friends, and we took a world religions course together, spirituality in our university, and we learned mindfulness meditation there. So that's when I had my first exposure to formal teaching. And then right around that time, I got my first tattoo, and it was a bird, and it was a swallow bird, and it signified rebirth and just a cycle, a beautiful cycle, an everlasting cycle. So I've always been a bird person. I've always been a meditator, and I've always been very creative. And so that's actually how I knew my friend and colleague Randall, who I worked with the Birdsong Project with, amongst a whole team of other people who just came together. I'd worked with Randall on many, many commercial campaigns over the years. And so what really triggered me or inspired, it didn't really inspire, it more prompted me, I should say, was in early 2020, we had the forest fires in Australia that had killed billions of animals. And then we had COVID happening at the same time, where not only our animals' lungs and lives were at stake, but our lungs and lives were at stake as well. And I really felt the call to action to do something. Now, was this when the idea first sparked in my head? I don't think so. I think I've always had this idea in me since I was probably a young child. I remember thinking, oh, it would be cool to do something with birdsong and human music. And so it is a very simple, beautiful, pure concept, but it felt very important to activate it at that time. It was just the right time. It was just the right people. And it was a nudge to make it happen. So we went back and forth. I threw a lot at Randall. I wanted to make sure that the bird song that was integrated wasn't just a nuanced bird song, that we really brought it to the forefront. And so I was just over the moon when the call went out. Randall already had a huge, obviously, Rolodex of musicians, and some of which we shared, and most of which, he had from a lot of his music supervision experience. And so we put the call out. And what happened with the project is the call would go out to say a dozen people. And then those people would bring a flock of other people. Everyone was getting so excited. And really what happened was everyone, as Randall said it, everyone just was at home during COVID and wanted an assignment and wanted to activate. And it really resonated. It was a very, uh, as I said earlier, an energetic chord that people just felt compelled to be part of. So I'm very, very, very grateful to the community that showed up. And something that I early on really wanted to make sure was present on the album art, or somewhere in the albums, I wanted the word Sangha. And Sangha in Buddhism, it means community. It's your community. And it's in many ways a spiritual community, a soul community. And it references our connection to one another and the importance that we have to one another and our connection. So that's right there on the back of the album. If you go get the album art, you'll see Sangha there. And then you'll just see so many incredible pieces of artwork that were carefully curated by our team across all of the album sleeves. Just beautiful, beautiful artwork. And then the hundreds of songs and poems that you referenced. So Nick Cave was actually our very first submission. When we put the call out, right away, him and Warren sent their song back. And so Randall emailed me and said, here's our first submission. And I believe I was in my kitchen making some sort of COVID soup. I don't remember, but I listened to it, and I heard the birds and the music. And that's when I realized, okay, this is going to be, I don't want to say the word big, but special. I just knew it was going to be special when I heard that. And it was very touching, I have to say, very, very touching. So yeah, then the tracks kept coming in. One artist would hear about it. They'd bring, like I said, 5 more, and it became very much a flock. And so the way this project has evolved, it's become much like a murmuration. I don't know if you're familiar with those who don't know what a murmuration is, but it's when you see those flocks of birds that come together and they're just moving together in this very special, magical, synchronized way, where without it's a very felt movement. It's a very felt collective movement. And that is what this project has been. And that's what it continues to be. So we've been working on this now for over 3 years. And I have to say, we continue to activate every day. Every day we get, I just got a letter this morning from a group that wants to show one of our films, because we've been doing films as well. And that's something that I've been more active in curating, as well as those films. So I've got several films still in pre-production that are happening, and just more and more people that want to be part of the project. And it is all a philanthropic effort. All of us have been just doing this out of the love in our hearts and the desire to further the message about the importance of our birds, our earth, our connection with one another. And from the start, we wanted this project to be unifying. So we had quite a few conversations around this, around how should this project take shape and what should it be about? And we came to the conclusion that we wanted it to be wholly artist owned. We didn't ever want to be telling people what they could and couldn't do necessarily. We had some guidelines like, please incorporate some birdsong if you can, or the idea of birdsong. We had some very creative artists who went out and created their own custom bird songs that they referenced or they might have heard, and then they went back and were inspired and created a piece of music that reflected what they heard. We had others who really took these recordings, some of which they had bird sanctuaries already in their backyards. So every artist that showed up, certainly I would say, had a love of birds and a love of life and a joy in art and community and sharing. And so this is the essence of our calling in many ways, or at least for me here on this earth, is to be in joy and in sharing of this. So I hope that answered some of what you were asking about, but
Oh, it did. It did.
It sounds like you're doing that with your meditation practice as well. So you as a producer have created the Birdsong Project, but you also have your meditation practice that is centered on that simplicity and mindfulness and giving back to the community and creating community. Can you speak to us about how you got into meditation, teaching meditation specifically?
I'd love to. Yes. So I've been a lifelong meditator, as I mentioned. It was a very natural instinct from a young age. I had my first meditation teacher experience at the age of 20. At the same time, that was in Ithaca, New York. There was a little mini Tibetan monastery in town that I would go to as well, and I would meditate with the Tibetan monks there. So I've always been more Tibetan Buddhism inclined myself. And it's a practice that's just really grown. And I've always kept a very beginner's mind about it. It's about the journey. It's not getting to a destination. So there's always something new to uncover or learn. But the meditation teaching for me it just felt like a natural next step. It was something I felt compelled to do last year at the beginning of the year, beginning of 2023. I signed up for a course that actually a musician, David Nichtern, who's an award-winning musician, is also a longtime meditator and created a school called Dharma Moon, which anyone can go to the website. And if they're interested and they would like to become a meditation teacher themselves or study, they can go to Dharma Moon, to David's school, which is affiliated with Tibet House. So it's a joint program. And I signed up for it. It was like a 6-month thing that I did over the weekends, but I did this program. And since then, I have a weekly residency that I do at a place called the Calming Spot in Santa Monica. And there I incorporate some mindfulness meditation, but I also do sound bowl healing. So it incorporates music and sound. So I do the sound bowls there as well. And some weeks I do Mommy and Me, which is really nice. So the kids get involved and I let them play instruments and we talk about mindfulness in a way that kids can understand. And other weeks I have it's more of an adult session. But so I do that. And then I began a residency at a place called the Ecology Center, which is a beautiful regenerative farm. And it's an hour south of Los Angeles. And it's a community center that is built upon peace. And their logo on their farm is a little peace symbol and farm. And actually that little pin that they have, it's at the center of my meditation altar at home and has been for quite some time now. So I felt compelled to activate. They were starting a yoga program there. And when I saw that they had started a yoga program, I got so excited because I was already a fan of the farm for years and had gotten their farm boxes and had taken my son there strawberry picking. None of the stuff There aren't any agrochemicals. It's a demonstration for what the future can be for farming and for communities and what it can really mean to communities. So there's yoga on the farm. And so I volunteered to start the mindfulness meditation. And so I go there every third Saturday of the month and I teach mindfulness meditation. And half the time I'm not teaching the mindfulness meditation because some of the people who show up already know it. And so I'm guiding it. Other times people are new to it and I'm explaining more. But the point is, we're sitting there. I bring my meditation bolsters. I set them out in the community garden, and whoever wants to show up can. It's free and open to the public. If people want to donate a little, it goes towards Ecology Center because it is a nonprofit. And we sit, and I have to tell you, the energy when you sit with a group in a space like that, it's very unique. And every time we do it, I give gratitude for, and I'll name the specific harvest and what we're getting at that point at Ecology Center. And it's just a very, very beautiful, important experience. And it's something that I also felt compelled to activate this year. And it's about cultivating inner and outer peace. And again, when we commune with our land and we really get more involved with our earth and our community, we just find some beautiful spaces to open up and continue to open in our world.
That's beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
Sitting in nature, and especially in an environment where everything is organic and natural, and and then giving thanks for the harvest isn't that the way we should all be living?
We're all here for a lesson. I think that everything is happening for a reason. And now we're at this certain point where we're able to look back and understand what some of this push was for, again, our presence here on earth. We're here talking on cell phones, and you're there and you're there and we're all here. There have been certain milestones in humanity's progress here in science and medicine and all sorts of things. I just want to say we all get to a point for a reason, and then we can look back and see what some of the lessons are. And we're allowed to make mistakes. We're allowed to make, mistakes that sometimes have good consequences and bad consequences. And the important thing is to learn from those mistakes and to integrate the learnings and to be mindful about how we continue and to have forgiveness and just to really pick up the pieces and see, okay, how can I activate in my everyday life, in my little anthill over here,
Do you have so what are some suggestions for our listeners?
Yeah. Well, so as Ina said, I got a certification as a life coach 2 years ago because I really felt compelled to help others activate their purpose from the space of compassion and love. And that space is where we can grow as individuals and as humanity. And what happens when you activate that inner voice and you follow that inner voice, it leads to other people's, when they're following theirs, and the dots start connecting. So it's important to, if there is a spark, an idea, to take action. And so that's one of the things that I work with my clients on when I am able to, and I love to make time in my calendar to coach and encourage others to really follow those nudges, because when you follow the nudges and you take action, much like you both, you're following the nudge, you're creating this amazing podcast and platform to share with the community and tell stories and extend the goodness. These things are very, very important, and we're connecting dots. I mean, Ingrid, you and I didn't know each other before today, but who knows what might happen now that we're connected. We're all following our instincts, right? And Ina felt the nudge to just bring this together. So that is something that I can say is very important to activate. Also, I would just say going out and connecting with nature, going on those nature walks. Someone asked me the other day, oh, what are your hobbies? And I said, I really like going and being in nature. Like I like sitting on the beach. I like meditating. I love connecting with community in kind of spiritual spaces. Like there's a place that I really like in Topanga where there's some community that gather at a Tibetan center that's on a farm called Pure Land Farms. And that was founded by Dr. Nita, who's a teacher of Bob Thurman's, who started the Tibet Center. So I like going there when I can. I've brought my son there. He loves it. They have a whole farm set out, and then there's a meditation center. And there are these places, if you can find these little niches in so many cities, even when I love traveling and then going, finding what the little niche centers are. For example, I had the good fortune to take my son to Maui a couple years ago. There was a beautiful peace center, and there was, I believe, is one of the largest prayer wheels in the world. And we went there and we walked around the prayer wheel and we made a wish, an intention for peace and love for everyone. And that's another thing that I would, if someone felt called, that's another thing that I would encourage people to think about, is when you make an intention and you put out a wish and you create a North Star that is peace and love for everyone, which that's been my North Star now for, it's the only thing that if you want to say pray or wish or whatever, it's the only thing that I will wish for is peace and love for everyone. When you create that intention, things happen and you'll be guided in certain ways that, and we're all welcome to wish for whatever we want, whatever that nudge is. But that really has been my nudge. And if someone's looking for something to wish for, I really encourage that, because some really interesting things start to happen when you're working from that place, or when you're living from that place, or starting to see. And then one other thing that I would encourage is just to try to witness events and everyday happenings with, just try to open up a little more space for compassion and love. We're all doing, I believe, the best we can, although some things that I see, I think, oh my God, how is this even possible? How is this still happening? What we need to do is remember to be activists in if there are big problems, we need to be activists in trying to be the balancers in many ways. So yeah, that's what I'll say. But again, if anyone who's listening to this is at all interested in coaching, I would love to be your personal coach. So feel free to reach out to me on my website, bunnyhawk.life. And I'd be so happy to take on another coaching client, especially folks that want to open up their spaces of creativity and activating anything. As an environmentalist, I always love to be a bounce board, because what happens in the coaching session is it's collaborative. It's, the word coach has it, I should probably call it something else, because it's not ever, oh, I know best and I will tell you what to do. The way I coach is, you know best, and I'll help ask some of the questions, but you already know the answers. And it's just a matter of nudging that a little more and opening up some space in the work that I do there. So
Yeah,
that's it.
that's wonderful.
Beautiful.
It sounds like you give them the space to trust themselves. Because I think as we're growing up, like when we're kids, we're so intuitive. We know what's off. We know what's bothering us. And the world is set up in a way that we start to question our authenticity. We start to question our instincts and our view of the world. And so we kind of grow up to not have trust in our instincts. And so you are there as a teacher to go, whatever you're feeling, that's authentic. Like face it. And what is your inner truth telling you? It's just opening that space, which I think is so beautiful that you do that.
Well, on that note, what I'll say is that I have a friend who's also a past colleague who's also involved in a nonprofit that I set up called Amazon Healing. So that's a whole other thing that I haven't touched upon. And tea too. Oh my gosh, we haven't really talked about tea. Monks have been drinking tea for centuries for a reason. It actually goes very, very well with meditation. It has L-theanine in it, which creates alpha waves in the brain, which is paired with the caffeine, and that's what creates a heightened state of awareness. And so, especially if you're a meditator, I highly recommend you choose tea. There have been stages in my life where I've gone for the coffee, and I love coffee and I love the taste. But I have to say, I actually haven't had one cup of coffee in a year now. I decided to just cut it out and see what might happen again with my own frequency. And when I lean into the tea, I find it's just a different energy. It really is. When I was in India in 2019, I met a tea farmer called Fernando Castillo, who lives in Ecuador and has a commercial tea business, but also organic dragon fruit. And so he has a very large farm in Palora, Ecuador, and he and his family live in Quito. Amazing family. I went to visit them in September, just this last September, and took a whole tour of what we've been setting up. But I decided to activate in that space, and so Fernando and I partnered up to start this foundation called Amazon Healing. And so we have been slowly and steadily, now mind you, the plague, the divorce, everything else, we've been slowly planting the seeds and getting to it. And at this point, we now have a full executive board of there's 15 of us total. And then there's Fernando and I. The mission of Amazon Healing is to help farmers and forests in the Amazon region. Now, what Fernando's told me, as he's there on the ground, is how sad it was every day for him to see trucks just bringing more old growth trees out, chopping them down, knocking them down to make space for other developments. And these are ancient forests. So he has a 300-hectare ancient forest in his property, which I happily trekked through in September, and it was incredible. It was a very long hike. By the end of the 6 hours, because I had just gotten off the plane, my back was killing me. And I said, I thought we were going to be back to the farm in 10 minutes. They said, one more hour. So it was an adventure, and it's amazing. And I highly recommend anyone that ever has an opportunity to go be in those forests, go do it right away. It's just a super cool experience. But our intention is to help farmers there to transition to organic or better. There is, in his particular region, there's been an issue with some monoculture happening and people not having enough of the educational resources to understand the alternatives to some of the traditional agrochemical sprays that are encouraged when you're farming in a monoculture way, which again, none of us want to open our fruits and see a beetle crawling out. So we need to find a balance, right? We need to find a balance of how we're sharing and distributing food and growing food throughout the world. So our goal is just simply to find a balance. It's not to shame anyone for doing anything. We understand what everyone's up against. We understand how difficult it is to farm some of this stuff with global warming now is an issue. But again, our purpose there is to activate and assist farmers. It's also to help preserve forests. And so we've been slowly launching that.
I just wanted to bring it back to the Birdsong project for the birds. Is there talks for a second compilation?
We have been talking about that for quite some time. Well, we already decided we're doing a devotional album, and that one I've got quite a few artists already that I'm thinking about. And then there's going to be a dance album as well. And we will do more compilations. It's only a matter of time. And back to your point that you made earlier, Ingrid, and I should have said this, but then we were talking about so many other things. But when you said that you wish that more people were incorporating birdsong, that's exactly what my desire was. I wanted this to become a movement where it became its own musical genre. You have jazz, you've got rock, you've got, folk. So my hope was that our project would just inspire more musicians to go out and create this. If you're listening to this, if you're a musician or if you want to be a musician, haven't yet, please go out and write some music using and incorporating and celebrating and loving the birdsong, because they are incredible musicians with things to say.
Oh,
Yes.
that's amazing.
Beautifully said. I
Aw.
love that, Becky. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
On our podcast, we aim to feature empowered women, and one of the things that we feel that an empowered woman is that she has the voice to speak up for those that can't speak up for themselves. So thank you for speaking up for the birds. Thank you for ushering this movement forward, and thank you for everything that you do.
Well, thank you both for this and everything. It's been a great conversation. And thanks again for inviting me on.
Welcome to Rise Up and Fix It, a podcast dedicated to empowering women.
A podcast dedicated to empowering the creator within you.
I'm the writer of the book, The Secrets of Becoming a Boss Bitch with a Heart of Gold. I'm a photographer, filmmaker, and producer, and people know me as Ms. Monday.
And I'm Ina Koropkina, actress, producer, and creative director of Jewel Branding Studios. Please support us by clicking on that subscribe button and tell others about our